Regret has a way of arriving exactly when you do not want it, quietly at the end of the day, when there is finally nothing left to hide behind. It does not knock, it simply settles into the chest and waits in the dark with all the patience in the world. And somewhere in that stillness, you may find yourself asking what you are supposed to do with a feeling that will not let you rest, and whether there is any way to lie down peacefully with everything you cannot go back and change. Welcome to Starlit Science Stories. This is a place for peaceful thoughts and quiet wisdom at the end of the day. A space where you do not have to be anything other than exactly what you are. You are welcome here, just as you are tonight. Tonight is not about fixing anything. It is not about arriving at some clean and tidy answer that has somehow been waiting just out of reach, as if the right combination of words could finally dissolve what you have been carrying. That is not why you are here, and that is not what this night is for. Tonight is something quieter than that, something slower and more honest. Tonight is about sitting with regret the way you might sit beside a low fire on a cold evening, not trying to put it out, not pulling away from its warmth, not explaining to it why it should not be burning, but simply allowing yourself to feel its presence without being consumed by it. Just sitting, just breathing, just being in the same room with something real. There is a chance, a very real and very human chance, that something brought you here tonight that you have been carrying quietly for longer than you can fully name. Maybe it is a choice that went one direction when some part of you, the part that does not always get a voice, wanted something else entirely. Maybe it is a person, someone you loved, or someone you left, or someone who left you. And the feeling around that is still soft in a way that surprises you sometimes, still capable of surfacing at unexpected moments, still unfinished in some wordless way. Maybe it is a version of yourself that you mourn in small and private moments, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet spaces between doing and being, in the pause before sleep, when there is nothing left to distract you from the inside of your own life. You do not have to name it precisely. You do not have to present it in a way that is logical or coherent or understandable to anyone, including yourself. This is not a space that requires you to be articulate about your pain or organized about your grief. This is a space where things are allowed to be what they are, unresolved, complicated, still tender, still present, without being immediately handed a solution or a framework or a 5-step path forward. None of that is needed here. The only thing that is needed here is you, and the willingness to let the breath come just a little more slowly, to let the night hold you without demanding anything in return. Because regret, when it is held gently, not gripped, not fought, not ignored, but truly held, is not a verdict. It is not the final word on who you are or what your life amounts to. It is something much older than that and much more quietly significant. It is a kind of wisdom that the daylight rarely has enough stillness to hear. And that wisdom, like all honest things, deserves to be heard in the quiet. So let the quiet come. Let it settle around you. And let whatever is true for you tonight be true, without apology, without explanation, without the exhausting performance of being fine. There is something almost physical about regret. That is the first thing worth noticing, and it is something that tends to get overlooked in the daylight hours, when the body is moving and the mind is occupied, and there are always more things to do and think about and attend to. But at night, when the body is still and the room is dark and there is no more doing left, the feeling comes forward in a way that is hard to dismiss. It is there in the chest, a kind of settled weight, not sharp, not dramatic, but present. The way a stone is present at the bottom of a river, the way a shadow is present in a room, You feel it before you name it, and sometimes you never name it at all. You just lie there with it, wondering vaguely what it is and why it chose tonight to sit so heavily. Most people move through years, sometimes entire lifetimes, believing that regret is simply the emotional pain of having made bad decisions. That is what the world tends to tell you regret is. A sign that you went wrong somewhere. A marker of the places where you failed to choose correctly, failed to act wisely, failed to be the version of yourself that would have navigated things more skillfully. And so the feeling carries with it a kind of low-grade shame, a quiet indictment. As if to feel regret is to confess to something, as if the ache itself is evidence of a character flaw. But regret is more layered than that, more honest than that, more human than that. It is not simply the pain of bad decisions. It is the mind reaching backward through time, genuinely reaching with something like urgency, something like need, trying to revise what cannot be revised, trying to re-enter a moment that has already sealed itself shut. It is standing at a door that is fully and permanently closed, pressing your hand against the wood, feeling the solid finality of it, and still somehow hoping that the door might open anyway, that the moment might give itself back, that the chance might return. The reach is not weakness. That is worth saying slowly and worth sitting with for a moment. The reaching backward is not a sign of fragility or failure or an inability to move forward. It is evidence of how deeply something once mattered. You do not reach for things that meant nothing. You do not return again and again to experiences that held no weight. The very fact that the mind goes back, that it keeps going back, that it cannot seem to help going back, is a testament to something real, something that had genuine meaning in your life, something that left a mark because it was worth leaving a mark. And yet the reaching has a cost. The further the mind strains backward, the more it pulls the self away from the only place where anything is actually happening. Not the past, which is finished, not the future, which is not yet here. But right now, in this breath, in this body, in this quiet room, in this particular moment of being alive and aware and still present in the world, life is always happening right here, only right here. And regret, at its most consuming, is the ongoing effort to be somewhere else, in a moment that no longer exists, in a choice that can no longer be made differently, in a version of events that was never and can never be. Marcus Aurelius lived one of the most complicated and demanding lives a human being could be asked to live. He was the emperor of Rome at a time when empire meant constant war, constant responsibility, constant pressure, constant loss. He watched people he loved die. He made decisions that affected millions of lives. He carried the weight of power in a way that most of us will never be asked to carry anything. And yet, his most private writings, the ones he kept in a journal that he never published, never intended for anyone else to read, the ones we now know as the Meditations, are full of gentle and persistent reminders to himself to stay here, to stay in the present, to stop the mind from wandering into what was or what might be. He wrote for himself, not for posterity, and what he wrote was this: that the present moment is the only honest dwelling place a person has, that the past is beyond reach, fully beyond reach, no matter how much feeling we pour in its direction, that the future is not yet real in any meaningful sense, that the life is here and it is only ever here, and the greatest discipline is to keep returning to it. This is not a command to forget. Marcus Aurelius was not asking himself, and he is not asking you, to simply erase what happened or pretend it does not have weight, or stop caring about the things that went wrong or the people who were lost. He was not a man who believed in numbing. He was a man who believed in presence. And what presence means, in the context of regret, is this. You can honor what happened without living inside it. You can acknowledge the weight without being defined by it. You can let the closed door be closed and still know that what was behind it was real and that it mattered and that you were a person who cared enough to feel its loss. That is the beginning of something. Not an ending, not a resolution, but a beginning. A very small loosening of the grip that the backward-reaching mind has been holding. Because when the grip loosens even slightly, when the straining toward what was eases even a little, a different kind of question begins to surface. Not the anguished question of whether you chose correctly, not the punishing question of what might have been, but a softer question, more curious than painful, more open than accusing. What has this ache been trying to tell you? Not about your failure, about your love, about what you value, about what matters to you, in the deepest and most honest places of who you are. That question deserves to be followed, gently, slowly, without urgency. Because inside that question is where a different kind of understanding begins to take shape. There is a quieter way of knowing regret that most people never quite arrive at. Not because they are incapable of it, but because the world tends to frame regret in a way that points it entirely in the direction of fault. You made a mistake. You chose poorly. You failed to act when action was needed, or acted when restraint would have served you better. The framing is prosecutorial, and when that is the lens through which you see the feeling becomes a kind of judgment, and you become the defendant in a trial that never seems to reach a verdict. But there is a different lens, a softer one, and it begins with an observation that is simple enough to say quickly, but takes time to truly land. You cannot regret something you did not care about. Read that again, slowly, if you need to. You cannot regret something you did not care about. The ache lives only where the love lived first. That is not a metaphor. It is a literal description of how regret works. It is not generated by indifference. It is not produced by carelessness or the absence of feeling. It is produced by the presence of feeling, by the fact that something or someone genuinely mattered to you, and that the outcome around that thing or that person did not go the way you hoped or intended or wanted. Think about what that means for a moment. Think about the regrets you carry. Not all of them, not in exhausting detail, but just as a general sense. Think about the weight of them, the particular quality of the ache. And now, consider. What does that ache point toward? What does it say about you, about what you value, about the kind of person you are when you are honest about what matters to you? A person who never loved anyone does not lie awake grieving the imperfect ways they loved. A person who never held a dream close does not feel the particular sadness of a road not taken. A person who was never present in their relationships does not carry the weight of conversations that went wrong or things that were left unsaid. The presence of regret is proof of presence. It is proof that you were there, that you were real, that you were alive in your own life in a way that allowed things to matter and affect you and leave marks. The ache is the shadow cast by something that once had light in it, and you cannot have the shadow without the light having been real first. Viktor Frankl spent 3 years in the Nazi concentration camps, Auschwitz, Dachau, and others, living through experiences that most human minds cannot fully hold. He lost almost everyone he loved. He was stripped of every material possession, every professional achievement, every external marker of identity. And he watched, with a psychiatrist's careful attention, what happened to the people around him, what allowed some to endure inwardly, even as their bodies were subjected to conditions that should have broken every human thing. What he found and what he wrote about for the rest of his long life, with a clarity that has never lost its power, is that meaning is the most essential human capacity. Not happiness, not comfort, not safety, meaning. The ability to find something that the experience is for, something it points toward, some reason, even a very quiet and private reason why this life is worth continuing to live. He did not apply this only to the extreme cases, to the catastrophic and the unimaginable. He applied it to the ordinary human ache, to the grief that has no dramatic cause, to the regret that lives quietly in a person for years. And what he said, in essence, was this: suffering ceases to be suffering, at least in the way that destroys a person, when it finds a meaning. When you can look at the pain and say, I know what this is for. I know what it points toward. I know what it says about me and about what I value and about the life I was trying to live. Regret, held in that way, is not the evidence of a life gone wrong. It is the evidence of a life that was genuinely lived, that had actual stakes, that mattered enough to leave something behind when it did not go as hoped. The scar is not the story of a body that failed. It is the story of a body that was real enough to be wounded, real enough to feel, real enough to have been in contact with the full, complicated texture of being alive. And when you begin to see the mark that regret leaves in that way, not as proof of failure, but as proof of presence, not as indictment, but as record, something shifts. It does not disappear. It does not stop hurting entirely, but its meaning changes. And when the meaning changes, the weight changes with it. Not lighter in the way that light things are easy to put down, but different, more honest, more human, more like something you could actually walk alongside rather than something walking behind you, gaining on you, threatening to overtake you every time you slow down. There is a difference between carrying something and being slowly crushed by it. That distinction sounds simple. It sounds like the kind of thing someone might say in passing, casually, without realizing how much work it holds. But the difference is vast. And most people who find themselves lying awake in the deepest part of the night with regret pressing down on them have not yet fully found the space between those two things. They have not yet discovered that there is a way to hold something heavy without being collapsed by it, a way to keep it without being consumed by it, a way to be honest about the weight without letting the weight become the whole story of who you are. Regret does not become its heaviest at the moment of its arrival. It does not peak when the door first closes, or the words first land, or the moment first reveals itself as something you will have to live with. It becomes its heaviest, its most suffocating, its most difficult to breathe inside of, when it is resisted. When the mind turns against itself and begins insisting that the feeling should not be here, that it is irrational, that it belongs to another time and another version of you, and that to still be here, still inside this ache, still feeling this thing, is a sign of weakness or self-indulgence or an inability to grow. When the internal voice says, you should be over this by now. When it says, a stronger person would have moved on. When it says, there is something wrong with you for still caring about something that cannot be changed. That voice is almost always wrong. And it is almost always more exhausting than the feeling it is trying to argue away, because the resistance is its own kind of work, the fighting of a feeling, the suppression of it, the constant effort to keep it from rising, that takes energy, real energy. The kind that leaves the body tense and the mind tight and the chest in that particular state of contracted quiet that is so familiar when sleep will not come. The feeling itself, allowed to simply exist, is rarely as heavy as the battle against it. The ache, permitted its honest presence, is rarely as consuming as the effort to deny it. Rumi knew this. Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet and mystic whose words have passed through every language and every century with almost no loss of their original warmth, understood something about the places in us that hurt that most of the rational Western philosophical tradition has been slower to acknowledge. He did not treat pain as a problem to be solved, or a wound to be efficiently closed and hidden beneath professional behavior and appropriate emotional management. He treated it as an opening. He wrote, in a line that has been translated many ways but always carries the same essential meaning, that the wound is the place where the light enters you. That the crack, the break, the hurt place. This is not where the self is diminished. This is where the self is deepened. This is where something real and luminous is able to come through that the unbroken, unscathed surface was never able to let in. To carry regret honestly, in the way Rumi is pointing toward, is not to make a performance of your pain. It is not to build a shrine at the site of what went wrong and return to it every day with fresh flowers of suffering. It is something quieter than that and more dignified. It is to give the ache its honest place in the story of who you are, to acknowledge, without drama and without shame, that this happened, that it mattered, that it left something behind, and that the person it happened to is still here, altered perhaps, quieter in some ways, wiser in others, carrying something that was not there before, but still here, still present, still breathing, still part of the ongoing and unrepeatable story of a human life. The art of carrying, and it is an art, a skill that is learned over time through something more like patience than practice, is the slow discovery that a feeling does not have to be fully resolved before you are permitted to breathe. You do not have to finish grieving before you are allowed to rest. You do not have to reach the final stage of understanding before the night is allowed to hold you. The regret can be here, in the room, in the chest, fully real and fully acknowledged, and still not fill the entire room. Still not take up every breath, still not be the only thing that is true about this night, or about you, or about the life you are in the middle of living. And when the resistance softens, not goes away entirely, not ceases to exist, but simply softens, the way a fist held too long eventually uncurls, because the muscles cannot sustain that degree of tension indefinitely. Something unexpected and tender sometimes surfaces. Not toward what was lost, necessarily. Not toward the choice, or the person, or the road not taken, but toward yourself. Toward the person who has been sitting inside this ache quietly for so long, without much acknowledgement, without much gentleness, doing the very human and very difficult work of carrying something heavy through an ordinary life. There is something there in that direction that is worth turning toward, something that has been waiting a long time for a moment of honest recognition. There is a particular loneliness that comes with regret, especially at night, especially in the hours after everything else has gone quiet and the world has retreated into its own rest, and there is nothing left to do and nowhere else to be, and the only company is the inside of your own mind. It is a loneliness that has a very specific quality, different from the loneliness of missing a person, different from the loneliness of being in an unfamiliar place, different from the ordinary human experience of feeling somewhat apart from the people around you. It is the loneliness of feeling like you are the only one awake with this particular weight, the only one who has made the particular collection of mistakes that yours amounts to, the only one whose regret is this specific shape, this specific heaviness, this specific combination of circumstances and choices and consequences. That feeling, the feeling of being uniquely burdened, of having a history that is not just difficult but somehow more difficult than what most people carry, of being alone in the specific texture of your pain, is one of the quietest and most convincing lies the mind tells in the dark. It does not announce itself as a lie. It arrives feeling like clarity, like an honest reckoning with the facts of the situation. But it is not clarity. It is the isolation that regret creates when it is not held in any kind of wider human context. When it is just you and the feeling and the silence, with no reminder that the silence is full of other people, countless other people, lying in their own dark with their own versions of exactly this. Every person who has ever loved someone imperfectly has lain awake wondering if they should have done it differently. Every person who has ever made a choice under pressure, under the influence of fear, of grief, of exhaustion, of youth, of the limited understanding they had at that particular moment in their life, has sat with the outcome and wondered what would have happened if they had chosen otherwise. Every person who has lived long enough to look backward at the landscape of their own years has found places there that give them pause, places that ache, places that, in the kindest and most honest assessment, did not go as well as they might have. This is not a small group. This is not a select circle of people who were weaker or less capable or more broken than the rest. This is the entire human family, everyone, without exception, without meaningful degrees of separation. The ache you are carrying tonight is the ache of being a human being. And that means you are in the largest, most universal, most ancient company that exists. The Buddha spent years trying to understand the nature of suffering, not to eliminate all feeling, not to achieve some kind of detached emotional numbness, but to understand why it hurts to be human and what might be done with that hurt in a way that does not simply compound it. He taught a practice that in the Pali language is called metta, a word that resists perfect translation, but that most teachers render as loving kindness or as goodwill, or simply as the quality of wishing well. The practice of metta involves sending that quality of attention outward to people you love, to strangers, eventually even to those who have caused you difficulty. But the practice begins, always, with the self. It begins with turning that quality of warmth inward, with offering yourself the same wish for peace, the same wish for ease, the same wish for freedom from suffering that you might naturally and without difficulty offer to a friend you love. That instruction is deceptively simple. Most people find it far more difficult than it sounds. It is not hard to feel compassion for a friend who is grieving a mistake. It is not hard to hold space for someone you love who is lying awake in pain over something they did or failed to do or cannot go back and change. There is a natural and easy generosity in that direction. You do not judge them harshly. You do not tell them they should be over it by now. You do not construct an argument about why their suffering is their own fault and they simply need to make better decisions. You sit with them. You make space for what they are feeling. You offer warmth without conditions. The tenderness comes easily because it is someone outside of you, and you can see their humanity clearly from the outside in a way that is harder to see from the inside. But to turn that same attention toward yourself, to lie here in the dark and offer yourself the same quality of presence you would offer to a friend, to say inwardly and with genuine feeling, "May I be at ease with this? May I be gentle with myself? May I be free from the punishment of endless self-judgment." That is the harder practice. And the Buddha knew it was harder. He was not naive about the way human beings relate to themselves, the particular harshness that tends to live in the self-directed voice, the tendency to be one's own most demanding and least forgiving critic. He understood that the capacity for self-compassion is not weakness and not indulgence and not the absence of accountability. It is the recognition that suffering is not a personal failure. It is the texture of a human life. It is what it feels like to be a conscious creature, navigating an uncertain world with imperfect information and limited time, and a heart that insists on caring even when caring is painful. Everyone who has ever been alive has sat in this same dark, not your exact dark, not your particular shape of regret, but a version of this, a night when the weight of the past was present and the self felt exposed and the quiet was not quite restful enough to allow sleep. That recognition, when it settles into the body, the deep felt recognition that you are not alone in this, that the company you are keeping tonight is the company of every human being who has ever lived, that does something quiet and real to the weight. It does not dissolve the weight entirely, but it changes its meaning. It transforms the loneliness into something more like kinship, more like belonging, even in the dark, even in the ache, to the long and complicated and beautiful story of what it means to be human. And as that belonging settles in, slowly, quietly, the way warmth settles into cold hands, something else becomes possible. The grip begins very gently to loosen, the holding so tight, the defending so hard, the keeping everything so carefully maintained in its painful position, that begins, just barely, to ease. And in the easing, space opens, just a little, just enough. At some point in the long and private conversation with regret, and it is a long conversation for most people, conducted over many years in quiet installments, the mind reaches a place where it simply cannot maintain the effort anymore. Not a dramatic breaking point, not a crisis, just a very ordinary exhaustion, the kind that comes from sustaining something for too long, from holding a position that requires constant energy to maintain, the position of arguing with what happened, the position of trying to rewrite what is written, the position of refusing to accept the finished quality of the finished past. The past does not negotiate. This is something that takes a long time to fully absorb, because the mind does not naturally want to accept it. The past does not revise itself. It does not offer new terms or additional context or a second chance at the moment that already passed. It does not apologize for being unchangeable. It does not meet you halfway in the middle of your wish for it to be different. It simply is what it is, permanent, complete, unalterable, waiting with perfect patience for you to stop throwing yourself against it. And the longer the throwing continues, the more exhausted the self becomes, and the further sleep retreats, and the longer the night stretches. Lao Tzu lived in ancient China, at a time so distant that many scholars are not entirely certain he was a single individual and not a collection of voices over generations. But the words that carry his name, gathered in the short and extraordinary text called the Tao Te Ching, have been speaking to the human condition for more than 2,000 years. And what they say, again and again in different images and different framings, but always with the same underlying insight, is that the way through things is not through force, not through resistance, not through the application of increasing pressure to an obstacle that is not going to move. The way through things is more like water. Lao Tzu returned repeatedly to the image of water, not because water is passive, not because it represents giving up, but because water understands something about reality that the pushing, striving, controlling human mind tends to miss. Water does not demand a particular path. It finds one. It does not force its way through solid rock. It flows around it, under it, into the smallest crevice, taking the shape of whatever it encounters, yielding to every obstacle. And yet, over time, water shapes everything it touches. The Colorado River, cutting through the rock of the Grand Canyon over millions of years, did not force the rock apart. It simply kept moving, kept yielding, kept being water, and the rock, in the end, gave way. Acceptance is the water. Acceptance is not the white flag of surrender, not the pretending away of what happened, not the emotional numbness of someone who has simply stopped caring. Acceptance is the intelligence of water, the willingness to let what has already happened be what it is, without the ongoing addition of suffering on top of it. To say, this occurred, it was real, it had weight, it left marks, and it is done. Not done in the sense of healed and integrated and transformed into something beautiful that takes much longer and is not required of you tonight. Done in the simple sense of finished, of having taken place entirely, of being, in its most literal meaning, the past. The version of you who made that choice, who said the thing that was said, who did the thing that was done, who stayed when perhaps leaving was needed, or left when perhaps staying was needed. That person was doing the only thing available to them in that moment. They were working with the understanding they had, the courage they had, the information they had, the emotional capacity they had at that particular point in their life. Not the understanding they have now, which is larger and includes the benefit of having lived through what followed. Not the courage they might have had if circumstances had been different. The understanding and the courage and the capacity that were actually available to them then, in that moment, with everything that was true about that time in their life. That is not an excuse. It is not a way of avoiding honesty about the consequences of what happened. The consequences are real. The impact on other people or on yourself or on the course of your life is real. None of that is being argued away. It is simply the truth about how human beings make choices, not from some omniscient position outside of time, not with the full knowledge of what every option will lead to, not from a place of complete emotional clarity and perfect information, but from inside the moment with whatever is available, doing the best that is possible given everything that is true. And that is what you did, every time. Even when the best available was not very good, even when the doing of it caused harm that you wish could be undone. You were a human being inside a moment, doing what human beings do. The truth of that, allowed to land, allowed to settle, not rushed past or quickly covered over, has a way of doing something to the ground beneath the body, something steadying, something that makes the darkness feel slightly less like a verdict and slightly more like just the dark, just the ordinary neutral darkness that surrounds a person at the end of a day, holding no judgment, asking nothing. As the muscles begin to release the tension that arguing with the past requires, as the breath begins to move a little more freely through the chest, something that has been waiting underneath all of the effort begins to become noticeable. A quality of the night, a stillness that is not heavy, an openness that has been there all along, underneath the weight, patient as water, waiting for the fighting to ease enough to allow itself to be felt. There is a thought that lives quietly in the background of almost every person who has lain awake with regret for any significant length of time. It is rarely spoken, it is rarely even fully acknowledged, because it has the quality of something slightly embarrassing to admit. Too exposed, too naked in its longing, too revealing about the private ways the mind punishes itself. But it is there. And it goes something like this. Somewhere, in some version of events, there exists a life that went right. A life that made the correct choices at the critical moments, that navigated the difficult relationships without causing the damage that was caused, that took the road that should have been taken and arrived somewhere better than here. And the person living that life is not me. That thought, held in the dark night after night, is one of the most quietly damaging stories the human mind is capable of telling itself. It posits a perfect alternative, a life without the particular marks and wounds and wrong turns that yours contains, and it uses the existence of that imaginary life as a constant measuring stick against which the actual life is always found wanting. It is a form of comparison that can never resolve in your favor, because the life being compared to yours is not real. It has never been real. It is a fiction constructed precisely in the shape of everything you wished were different, and it exists only to remind you of the distance between what is and what you wish had been. Alan Watts spent the better part of his life, as a writer, as a speaker, as someone who spent years genuinely wrestling with the deepest questions about the nature of existence, taking apart the illusions that the human mind builds and then inhabits as if they were architecture rather than imagination. He was interested in the ways people suffer, not only from real pain, but from the stories they tell themselves about reality, from the frameworks they construct that make the actual experience of being alive feel like a problem to be solved rather than a life to be lived. And one of the ideas he returned to most often, in various forms, with various examples, but always with the same underlying gentleness, was this: life is not a journey toward a destination. It is not a problem awaiting its solution. It is something much more like music. Think about that for a moment. Think about what music actually is and what it is for. The point of a piece of music, a symphony, a song, something played quietly in a room at the end of the day, is not to reach its final note as efficiently as possible. No one listens to music hoping it will be over soon so they can have arrived at its conclusion. The point is the playing, all of it. The first tentative notes and the building phrases and the moment where something changes key unexpectedly and the long, slow passages that seem to move nowhere for a while before they resolve into something that makes every moment of their uncertainty worthwhile. The silences between the notes, the imperfect moments, the places where the instrument's particular limitation becomes the piece's particular beauty. All of it is the music. None of it is a mistake in the sense of something that should not be there. Your life is more like that than like a problem that was supposed to be solved correctly. Your regrets are not the evidence of a performance gone wrong. They are part of the playing. The choices that did not go as hoped, the relationships that were complicated and imperfect, the roads taken and not taken and taken wrong and returned from, these are not blots on an otherwise clean record. They are the texture of a life that was genuinely played, with real stakes, with actual feeling, by someone who was present enough in their own life to be affected by it, to be moved by it, to be changed by it. That is not a failure. That is exactly what a human life is made of. The person who made those choices, who was there in those moments, doing those things and saying those words and making those decisions, was not a sleepwalker, was not absent, was not indifferent to the life they were living. That person was present, was engaged, was caring enough about something or someone or some version of themselves they were reaching toward to act. And then they lived with the outcome of that action, the way every honest human being must, the way every person who has ever lived has had to do. That person is not a cautionary tale. That person is a human being who was alive, and that same person is here now. Tonight, in this quiet room, in this body, in this moment, having traveled the whole length of all of it, not untouched, not unmarked, not unchanged, but here, still breathing, still capable of being moved by the question of what a life is for, still present enough to care about how it went and whether it mattered and what might be done with all of it now, still here. There is something in that, something quiet and strange and worth pausing over. The being here of it. The fact that despite everything, the self persisted. The fact that you made it through the nights that felt unendurable, through the choices whose consequences unfolded in ways you were not prepared for, through the losses and the disappointments and the moments when the ground gave way beneath something you thought was solid. You made it through all of that, and here you are. Not on the other side of it, necessarily. Some of it is still very much present, still being worked through, still unresolved in the ways that real things take real time to resolve. But here, in the middle of your life, still feeling, still asking, still present enough to lie awake at night caring about things. That is not nothing. That is actually quite remarkable. There is a strange and very real dignity in having been human all the way through. Not perfectly, not without the costs that full human engagement always carries. Not without the marks and the weight and the particular shape that a life full of actual experience leaves on the person who lived it, but fully, honestly, with your whole self involved in it, for better and for worse, all the way through. And the night that surrounds you now knows that. The dark is not here with accusations. It is not here as the final examiner who has been reading the record and is ready to deliver a verdict on whether you lived your life well enough. The night is simply the night, patient and indifferent to your failures, and generous in the way that all truly large things are generous, simply holding you in it without judgment, without the requirement that you be anything other than what you are. And as that begins to settle into the body, slowly, the way warmth settles into a cold room after the heat has been on for a while, gradually, without fanfare, perhaps the last of what is being held, the last of the effortful holding in place begins to release. Not forced, not commanded, simply allowed. The way a hand held closed for a long time eventually, in sleep, uncurls itself without any decision being made, simply because that is what the hand does when it is no longer required to hold. So here you are, at the end of a long day, at the end of a long conversation with something that has been present in you for a while, something that does not have a simple name but that you know the feeling of, the particular weight and texture of, the way it shows up at this hour and settles into this specific place in the chest. And perhaps not necessarily, not as a demand, but as a gentle possibility. Perhaps something inside you is just a little softer than it was when you first arrived here tonight, a little more willing to let the night do its work, a little less at war with what cannot be changed, and a little more at rest with what simply is. You did not come here to solve regret, and it is worth saying that again, slowly, because it is worth really hearing. You did not come here to find the right series of thoughts that would finally dissolve the ache, the right philosophical framework that would make the weight disappear, the right perspective that would retroactively fix what went wrong. That was never what this was, and in some quiet way, you probably knew that when you arrived. Some part of you already understood that the solving is not the point. The point is something different, softer, more like companionship than like repair. Some things are not meant to be finished in a single sitting. Some things were never meant to be finished at all, not in the sense of being entirely resolved and set aside and never visited again, but finished in the sense of being alive. They remain, they continue. They are part of the ongoing and living material of who you are. And that is not a failure of healing. That is simply the nature of things that matter. The things that mattered remain. They do not necessarily remain as pain forever, but they remain as part of the texture, the particular and unrepeatable texture of this specific life that only you are living. What changes? What can change over time through nights like this one, through the slow and patient work of simply sitting with things rather than fighting them, is not the presence of what happened, but the relationship with it. Not the fact of the regret, but the way the regret is held, whether it is held as judgment or as history, whether it is held as punishment or as record, whether it is carried as something that proves something wrong about you, or as something that speaks honestly and without shame about what you loved and how you tried and who you were in the middle of a life that was genuinely and completely your own. Whatever you have been carrying tonight, whatever specific shape the weight takes for you, whatever particular form the ache has in your chest at this hour, you are allowed to set it down now. Not permanently, if that feels like too large a commitment. Not forever, if the forever of it feels too vast and uncertain. But just for tonight, just for these hours, just while the body does what the body needs to do, which is to rest, which is to release, which is to soften into the darkness without requiring itself to solve anything or hold anything in place or be accountable to anything other than the simple and profound business of being alive and breathing and here. Not to abandon what you carry. You are not being asked to walk away from it, to pretend it has no weight, to stop caring about it or stop being honest about what it means. You are allowed to return to it tomorrow if you need to. It will be there. The important things are always there when you return to them. But for now, for these hours, for the duration of this quiet and unhurried dark, you can let it rest somewhere beside you rather than inside you. Outside of the chest, beside the bed, on the floor if you like. Just set it down gently, the way you might set down something heavy that you have been carrying for too long, and let yourself feel for a moment what it is like to not be holding it. The breath can come slower now. There is no emergency in this moment. There is nothing happening in this night that requires the body to be braced, the chest to be tight, the mind to be alert to danger. The danger, if there ever was any, is not here. The crisis, if there was one, has already passed. What is here is only the dark, and the body, and the breath, and the quiet. And the breath can come slower, and the chest can open just a little more with each exhale, and the exhale can be a little longer than the inhale, the way it always wants to be when the body is ready to rest, the way it becomes when the resistance eases and the body is allowed to do what it knows how to do. The day is over. It is important to let that land. The day is over, fully, completely, irrevocably over. Whatever it contained, whatever happened in it, whatever was said or done or left unsaid or undone, it is finished. It has joined the long and irreversible record of everything that has ever occurred, and nothing you do in this night will add to it or subtract from it or change its shape in any way. The day is finished, and this night does not require you to carry the full weight of your history or your choices or your regrets or your questions into sleep with you. None of that is asked. None of that is needed. The night is neutral. The dark is generous. Sleep, when it comes, will come simply, the way it always does. Not as a reward for having resolved everything, not as the prize for having been wise enough or healed enough or sufficiently at peace, but simply as the body's honest need, met at last by a mind that has finally stopped fighting long enough to allow it. You are here. That is the simple and irreducible fact of this moment. After everything, after all of it, however much there is, however heavy it has been, however long the road of it has been, you are here, still breathing, still present, still in this body, in this room, in this night, and in a life that could have been so many different things, that was shaped by so many choices and chances and things entirely outside your control, that carried you through experiences you would not always have chosen and placed you in moments you could not always have anticipated, in a life that was, in the end, exactly what it was, imperfect and real and entirely yours. The being here of it is not a small thing. It is the whole thing, actually. Quietly, without drama, without any fanfare that the dark would allow, it is everything. Because everything that was ever real for you happened here, in this body, in this life, in the ongoing and unrepeatable experience of being you. The love happened here, the loss happened here, the trying happened here, the failing and the trying again happened here. The moments of unexpected beauty and the moments of deep and private grief, all of it happened in exactly this life, in exactly this body, on exactly this particular path through the world. And the path continues, even now, even in the quiet, even in the dark, even in the softness of this slow and sleepward breathing. The path continues. You are on it. You have always been on it. You will be on it tomorrow, when the light comes back and the day begins again with its ordinary and extraordinary demands. But that is tomorrow, and tomorrow is not here yet. What is here is only this: the night, the quiet, the breath, the body slowly letting go of the day, the chest loosening its held-in tension, the shoulders dropping slightly toward the bed, the hands uncurling, the mind slowly beginning to release its grip on the questions it has been holding so tightly, not because the questions are resolved, but because questions and the night are not always good company for each other, and the body knows this even when the mind is slow to agree. Let the quiet come now. There is nothing in this moment that requires anything else from you. You have thought enough for tonight. You have felt enough for tonight. You have been present with something real and heavy and human, and that presence itself, the willingness to be with it rather than flee from it, is its own kind of quiet courage. It is enough. You are enough. Not because you have done everything right, or because the regret has been fully resolved, or because you have arrived at some clean and satisfying conclusion to the ongoing story of your own life, but simply because you are here, because you are still trying, because you are a human being doing the endlessly complicated and quietly beautiful work of living, and that work, even on its hardest nights, even in its most unresolved and heavy hours, deserves rest. Let the breath come slow. Let the exhale be long and full and unhurried. Let the body sink a little more deeply into whatever is beneath it. Let the room be what it is, quiet and dark and safe, and holding you exactly as you are, with everything you carry and everything you have been through and everything you hope for and everything you cannot yet name. There are people all over the world lying in the dark tonight with something heavy in their chest. You are not alone in this. You have never been alone in this. The weight you carry tonight has been carried by human beings since the first human being was capable of looking backward at a life and feeling the ache of what could not be undone. That ache is ancient. It is as old as consciousness itself. It is the price of caring, and caring is the price of being alive, and being alive is the most extraordinary and improbable and unrepeatable thing that is happening to you right now, in this moment, in this body, in this quiet, dark room. So let the quiet hold you. Let the night be generous with you, the way the night always is when you stop requiring it to be something other than it is. Let the sleep come in whatever way it comes. Slowly, probably, the way most real things come when they are not forced. First, just the deepening of the breath, then the loosening of the body, then the softening of the mind's grip on the thoughts that have been keeping it company tonight. Then, at last, the slow and formless drift into rest. You came here carrying something, and you were honest about that, and you stayed with it, and that is not nothing. That is, in its quiet way, everything that was needed tonight. Let the quiet come now. Let it come soft and slow and steady, patient as water, gentle as the dark. unhurried as all things that are truly restful tend to be. Let it come the way sleep always, eventually, in its own time, in its own way, finds its way to the people who are finally still enough to receive it. You are still here. That is enough. That has always been enough. Rest now.